Hey, thanks, Trevor. Happy and excited to be here. I'll introduce myself real quick and then have Bradley, or better known as Red, do kind of a quick overview. But my name's Devin Eldridge. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Bitwave, and have a background both as a CPA and then also an operator at DeFi companies and a large Bitcoin miner. So really excited to be here and talk about privacy and what that really means as we evolve into enterprise landscape here. Red, I'd love for you to do a quick intro. You have like everybody's dream job. You pretty much get to, write things down in your diary and then share them with the world. That sounds like so. Tell us a little about what you do for Messari.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. So hard to agree. Definitely a dream job. I'm a research analyst at Messari, which is a market intelligence and data company in the crypto space. So what I do there is I cover base layer protocols, I cover privacy protocols, look at what is happening in the quantitative sense, in the qualitative sense, tie it all together, take things that are maybe developer docs or just raw data and make them digestible to anyone who's interested, be it an investor or just someone trying to learn some more. My background is in software development, so I do a little bit of software development in the crypto space still, but that's not what I do full time anymore.
Awesome. So just talking about learning here today, great resource. Red's looking at the top things that are coming out. What are the new technologies? What are the new protocols that are going to change the landscape of the industry? So check out his research whenever you can. And we're going to dive into it a little bit here. We talk about privacy a lot in the crypto space. I think originally from, a peer-to-peer perspective, even, things as early as, Bitcoin with change addresses, with, Zcash and Monero being able to, um, monitor, or I guess, be able to block like, people viewing transactions and where they're hopping to. But there's a lot going on, in the enterprise space as well. And when we look at things like ZK technology that's been around since the 1980s, I think, and things like that, and we're starting to adopt that into some of these protocols. Can you give us a quick rundown of what that means? Like, what does privacy in Web3 mean? Maybe with an enterprise lens as we start to go down that route.
Yeah, totally. So uh, first off, I'll say that there's a lot of misconceptions about what is private and what is not private in Web3 in the crypto space. And generally, people will look at, Bitcoin or, some of your, Ethereum or popular chains and think, okay, my name is not tied to this. I'm a number, I'm a, hashed address. I have privacy. It's pseudonymous. You have it to a degree, as you mentioned, Monero and Zcash. There are projects that really focus on this, but privacy comes into a few factors. One, it's what am I doing on chain? Is that private? Two, it's is my behavior on chain really affecting what's happening with me? So where that comes into play with an enterprise, you know, uh, MEV is an issue, maximal extractable value, where people might front run your transaction. And when everything's public and everything's online, and you're an enterprise and you're moving with a lot of size, this could be an issue. You don't want people front running your transaction because it's extracting a bit of value away from you. So you have these issues when you're a business. Also, if you're an enterprise, say you wanted to integrate crypto payments, allow your employees to get paid that way if they choose. Well, maybe not everyone wants their employer to have a lens into their bank account where they're getting paid, or to have their coworkers be able to see that. So you run into all these problems when everything is completely transparent, that are great for accountability. And, we love that transparency, but then we run into a lot of friction when we look at the traditional actions we want to complete with our day-to-day lives and businesses, and even, B2B transactions and things like that.
Yeah, I love it. And I think, yes, you're exactly right. There's this transparency in the industry, and I think that's where, some of the new technologies come in, right? Is given all of the monitoring tools, given that these items can now be more easily tied to an individual or a business. What is the role in ZK technology that is playing and helping some of this? Because I think it's been, quite a buzzword this year with, even every
Oh
layer
yeah.
one saying, hey, our ZK product's coming, whatever it is. Can you give us an overview of ZK technology and what that means for people that aren't familiar with it?
Totally. Yes. I'll prepare you all. So next time someone's throwing buzzwords at you and they mention ZK, you know what it's about. Uh, ZK can do two things. I mean, it stands for zero knowledge. And the gist of that is I can convince you of something, I can prove something to you without having to go through all the work to get there or without revealing anything about the thing. That's a little bit abstract, but a 5-second example I like is how can I prove to you that I've solved a Where's Waldo puzzle? How can I prove to you without showing you where Waldo is that I've done it? Well, if I cut him out of the puzzle and I showed you the piece, you don't know where it came from in the puzzle, but I mean, you're convinced like, hey, I've got it. I must have found it. So that's kind of making it more tangible of how can I convince you of something without showing you how I did it. But it's not only for privacy. A lot of the ZK we hear about is for scaling. When you look at scaling and privacy, they're kind of two sides of the same coin because the idea is I want to do all this, heavy, expensive computation off chain where it's cheaper. And then I'll prove to you on chain that I did everything the right way. And, if you're able to believe that, through a mathematical proof, then okay, great. Yeah, we don't need to do it on chain. We can save a bunch of money this way. Well, the other side of that is if I'm doing all of this off chain, that data is not on chain. So if I am selectively having some things happen off chain, well, now they're not on chain. They're not transparent for everyone to see. The rules and guidelines of how we have to build transactions of you know I sent you 1 ether. I need to prove that I actually had that 1 ether to send. If my balance isn't public, how do I prove it? So you get into this point where, okay, am I using a zero knowledge proof, an attestation that I've done something correctly to save money and move computation off chain for the sake of scaling? Or am I doing this because I want to preserve some privacy, for some reason or another? So when you hear ZK, no, it's for several reasons. And in many cases, a misnomer. ZK just implies privacy by the name. It's not always what it is. So you might hear the word validity proof instead of ZK proof be thrown around. There's some teams building in this space that are kind of weary of maybe the marketing of that word now and how it might be misleading, but that's generally where it is. It's I want to take computation, do it off chain in an environment that's much cheaper, or for the sake of no one seeing what I'm doing, and then I'll put it on chain later and everyone can trust it was done correctly.
Yeah, I really appreciate the overview. And, I've always, I think one of the, we talked about, especially in years past, decentralization is such a buzzword of like, where are you on the scale? And I think people didn't realize like, hey, if you talk about a decentralized exchange, everyone's always, all right, just throwing the label on there, but not realizing, what does that mean? What parts are decentralized? And that's kind of how I see ZK technology being used right now, or at least the label is, where are you on this scale? And I think that should be adjustable, right? Is what information needs to be shared, and that might be different from transaction to transaction, from party to party of what makes them comfortable. We just had Maple on a panel, right, doing loans. What makes that party comfortable, of what information needs to be shared in order to extend a credit line. And that's where I see some of these, the ZK technology being useful is everybody's going to have these different, checks and balances that they need, especially as we're waiting for any regulation on this, right? Where it's kind of the wild west of like, hey, should this person be credit worthy? And each party needs to have their own little process there. So, you mentioned different companies doing different things here, different protocols. In all of your analysis, all of your research, who would you say is kind of winning privacy at the moment? Whether that's an L1 or a new protocol, what are you excited about currently, or that has been rolled out already?
Yeah, so in terms of privacy, what really excites me is teams that are building it on the base layer. So as you mentioned before, you might want to have selective disclosures on what kind of information am I actually going to share. It's a lot harder to add in later. So when you add in privacy by default, it's a lot easier to peel away layers and say, yes, I'm applying for this loan. This is the information I'd like to share. by default, all my information is private, but I'll show you, bits and pieces. It's a lot easier to do that when by default everything is private. So Monero and Zcash are a couple of pioneers in that space, but they don't have the programmability, which makes things tough. There are chains that are building in that privacy and programmability from the base layer. Aleo is one of them. That's a independent layer one blockchain. Aztec is a layer two building on Ethereum with privacy by default on there. So they're kind of taking some of these ideas, from earlier, and now that we have a lot more applications. You mentioned ZK proofs have been around since the 80s. We've had this type of cryptography, but I believe Zcash was the first to use it. A lot of these things were just really in theory. We didn't have the need for all this cryptography. And I mean, now the field is electric, the academic field of it, because, hey, we have all these use cases. This is awesome. We haven't done everything we need to do. There's a lot more. So those are two chains I'd say are exciting. There are also infrastructure networks, I'd say, that are maybe not exactly crypto projects, but they're leveraging blockchains as an incentive mechanism or just a credibly neutral platform to run. So NIM is a mixnet that's doing that. LokiNet is another. They both have blockchains tethered to them, while they are themselves not blockchains. And then there are still a lot of teams building interesting things on the DApp level. So we know Tornado Cash was banned. It was put on the OFAC list by the US government, but there are people trying to build interesting alternatives that will allow selective disclosure. So privacy pools is one of those. The white paper on that came out recently. It's an interesting one where it's, hey, we can be compliant with regulations. We can let people selectively choose to do that, but we're still going to offer this privacy that a lot of people want. In terms of the enterprise scope, there are a couple projects building specifically with that enterprise focus in mind. So Polygon Nightfall is one of these, and IOG's Midnight sidechain, which is a sidechain for Cardano. IOG's one of the core contributors to Cardano. They're building this sidechain, and these both have a more TradFi and enterprise focus, for the reason of this privacy. And again, as I mentioned before, there are other types of privacy that might come into play. So you might get a DEX that is, when you enter and leave, people are going to see, okay, this is, Devin's money going in, and he does whatever in this space, and then Devin's money comes out. But in that space, you will be able to interact with the DEX or something like that and have no one front run you and have privacy for that different purpose. It's not for, I want to be anonymous on chain or any kind of secrecy. It's, I don't want people front running, or I don't want people, interacting or, trying to extract in any other way from my on-chain actions. So I know there's a DEX on Starknet building that way, which is another Ethereum L2, but the space is pretty vibrant. People are building in a lot of directions for a lot of different, use cases or audiences.
Yeah, yeah, and just to kind of recap, I think that's a really fascinating point there of how an enterprise might use a pool, and of course the white paper you referred to was written, I think, is by Vitalik Amin, who's been in the space for a while in a few projects like Reflexer, and then I believe someone from Chainalysis. So it's an interesting combination of people, but something I think that brings a lot of validity to, hey, this technology that's been used in things like Zcash, like Monero, like Tornado Cash, that have been, I think in the past maybe gotten a bad reputation for, hey, this is only individuals who want to use this for illicit finance. That same technology is going to be what enterprises adopt in order to have privacy for whatever it is that they're doing. So whether that's lending and credit, I imagine like an M&A transaction, right? I want to have something in escrow. I don't want people seeing money moving around from from company A to company B. How do you keep those private? And so you can enter into these tools, you can see activity, the ins and outs, but you're not seeing what's going on in the middle. And that's really what these protocols and technologies were doing before. You send a transaction through Tornado Cash, it was going to mix those up and send them in various transactions on the other side so that you can trace it. And that's really all these technologies are doing, is just keeping the monitoring to where it can be. And in some people's minds, that it's, hey, don't monitor me at all. And in the enterprise mind, it's like, hey, I want to keep my enterprise data, safe and protected and kept safe from exploits.
Totally. I mean, that's your moat, right? These are your business secrets. And it's great that blockchains are transparent, but if you want to protect these business secrets on, even your trades, people totally follow certain wallets that they don't know who the wallet is, but they know this wallet makes good trades, and they follow them or they try to front run these wallets, and here go your strategies and business secrets out for everyone to see. Like you want to maintain that moat.
Oh, awesome. And going back to something you mentioned before, Red, you mentioned maximum extractable value used to be called minor extractable value till the stopped mining on Ethereum. Um, what are you seeing there on the privacy realm? How is, and maybe just a brief overview of what those players, like Flashbots, or people that are using that type of technology are doing, and then how does privacy technology maybe protect against some of those people that are making a lot of money in what is a programmed way to make money, but pretty much allows retail or other people to defend against some of those techniques.
Yeah, definitely. So MEV it's an issue in many places, but I think the conversation's most prominent in Ethereum, because it has a mempool and because it has smart contracts and all these things. So it's kind of the idea of, yeah, let's say whether I'm using an order book or liquidity pools, however I want to make a swap, if I'm coming in here with size, it's going to move the prices a little bit, right? So if you get in and buy, and then I move the prices, and you get in and sell right after, so you sandwich my transaction, you stick yours in front and behind, you're gonna make a little bit of money. That money comes, from me or whoever this whale is that's making this transaction with size. So, if this is your company that wants to do this, there's a little bit being taken off the top, and that's an incentive for if I'm building a block, how can I, or maybe I'm not the one doing it as the block builder, but I can bribe the block builder. And I'll say, hey, I'll give you some extra fees. Here's a deal sweetener for you if you put my transaction here, and then right after the whale's transaction, you put another one of mine. So with everything being public and having a mempool, it's pretty hard to avoid that. And not all MEV is bad MEV, right? I mean, we want people to balance out our liquidity pools. Like arbitrage is something we really need for a lot of DeFi protocols to work. So it's not all bad. Some people want to get rid of it. Some people want to just lean right into it and say, yes, let's let it happen. But maybe we separate who's proposing the blocks and who's building them. And we kind of democratize this money, or, it ends up being like maybe a tax on a specific person, but it gets a little bit more distributed. So a lot of strategies. I don't think there's really a clear-cut way to go about this, but we do know that Flashbots and their MEV boost is being run by nearly all ETH validators because it's profitable and it makes money. So you kind of have to trust the market to do what is like mathematically the right choice, like make more money. And you have to change your incentives if you want to change that. Everyone's not going to say out of goodwill, oh no, I won't front run you or I won't do this. Privacy is a great way to do that. If you don't know what's in the mempool, if you have encrypted transactions and you don't know what they are until they're actually set in place in the block, well, they're already set in place. You can't do anything about it then. So, having encrypted transactions using a zero knowledge proof or some other strategy and putting those in a mempool, it's a great way to, get around that.
No, it's a great use, I think, and it's great. I think to your point of all MEV is not bad MEV. I think it's just there are always opportunities right in the market, and we saw that early, a couple years ago, when this maximum extractable value was first being used. A lot of people were making a lot of profit. More people come in, try to counter that with more capital, right? To counteract the flash loans, and vice versa. And so I think all of these techniques and strategies are good because they help essentially, pull everybody to like what is best, where the incentives aligned. And sometimes they just happen to be early incentives that some people see and can, extract more value at an earlier time. So very, very cool. And I think, all of these privacy techniques can help with, just, throwing people off. And we saw this in the traditional, equities market. And I think we're still kind of in the primitives in our asset market, right? where these are, these different technologies kind of counteract against each other. Awesome. Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot, especially with enterprises that are operating and kind of seeing their customers use these technologies. What are some of the regulatory landscape, maybe evolutions that you see on the horizon with some of these technologies? We talked about Tornado Cash and using that same technology for enterprises. What are some of the things that you could see on the horizon here?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'll look into my crystal ball here and make some guesses. Regulatory uh, might continue to be an issue in the U.S. It looks like a lot of other countries are or a lot of other governments, should I say, are a lot more friendly to some of these things. So we have a lot of people that aren't really a fan of those tools in the States. I mean, that's why Tornado Cash is sanctioned, and it's not really a clear precedent on what you do if someone just spins up another Tornado Cash, right? They arrested the developers for making it. So, like, if someone else wants to go deploy another instance, will that be blacklisted as well? Will the wallets associated with that be blacklisted? Will Circle be forced to freeze these because they're a compliant company and they operate within the U.S. Like, all these companies that are, proper centralized companies, will they, be forced to, hey, I'm not trying to break any rules. Like, yeah, I'm going to comply. I'm going to, do what the government in my jurisdiction is telling me to. Will that happen? We don't really know. Privacy pools, things like that are a good step towards it. We still have privacy currencies like Monero not listed in a lot of countries on centralized exchanges. So it's hard to say when that'll come. I find it inevitable. I mean, I don't really see the issue with these things becoming more like cash, and less like maybe a credit card or a CBDC where, cash has that fungibility to it. Uh, I see it as inevitable that these things become supported, and there are a lot of people in the States too that are supportive of crypto and specifically privacy. They're anti-CBDC. So we have some people in office and Senate or the House that uh, think, hey, cash isn't such a bad thing. Like, we like fungibility. We don't want a CBDC that's feels like a CCP coin. So there are enough people interested in what I think are the right way to go about privacy and regulation and enough people building it that I see it as pretty inevitable. I don't know when, but let's hope soon.
Yeah, no, I like the analogy to cash. I think that's very well put, and I don't think I'd heard it before. So, well, one of the things I know in your diary there, you've got what's coming. Can you share maybe what's ahead or what launch you're really looking forward to in the coming weeks or months here?
Totally. What I'm really interested in the privacy space are advancements in fully homomorphic encryption. So if that
Break
sounds
that
like
down.
a silly moon math term, it's because, yeah, sure it is. If zero knowledge proofs are single player, I encrypt something, I put it on chain, you check it later. I provide an attestation that this computation was done, that these transactions were processed properly. I put it on chain, you check it later. That's, kind of like one and done. Homomorphic encryption is I encrypt something and then we can work with it. And then I can put this value on chain, multiply it by their encrypted values, whatever you want. And finally, the product of it, you decrypt it. It's what it would be if you did everything normal. So when you have things like that, yes, I can put things on chain. I can put, you know, AI related things on chain. I can work with language models. I can work with algorithms, and I can do this computation on chain for everyone to see out in the open. And then, typically you'd have to do these things off chain. So we're probably a little bit far away from that in terms of hardware limitations. But there are really cool teams like Zama and Secret Network that are really into homomorphic encryption and what we can do with it. It blows the door wide open. If ZKPs gave us a lot of flexibility and a lot of new use cases, homomorphic encryption is absolutely going to do the same. So yeah, those are a couple of projects working on that. Just in the privacy space in general. I mean, Risk Zero is working on cool stuff. Anoma is a cool interoperability project with privacy. There are people building everywhere and really every ecosystem. You have them, some of them are building it for compression, not privacy with this kind of technology, but it's additive and it really benefits everyone because it's all also open source software, which is the best way to build.
Yeah. That's great. And, just with our audience here, we always talk about, the accounting problems. Yes, they're hard in the space. And they don't tend to ever wind down. There's always, more and more to think about. And this obviously gives people a lot more to think about. But one of the other things is really the data acquisition, right? Is, keeping track of wallets, keeping track of all the transactions. When you throw on this privacy layers, that can be, pretty much bespoke to each enterprise and how they want to operate on them. It adds that level of complexity, to being able to just make sure that you have a complete picture of your client, of that person, what they're doing on chain. And so, really fun technologies. I think the complications abound and only seem to, multiply on each other. But I think that's what keeps us all in it and makes it really fun.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a large reason of why I'm in this space is that stuff is so exciting, and it just sounds so freeing, right? Like, what if you can have medical data on chain while maintaining everyone's privacy, and you can get aggregates of it with something like homomorphic encryption? That it sounds counterintuitive, but you can be so much more collaborative if you don't have to trust everyone. So working in a trustless environment, yeah, counterintuitively is so much more collaborative, and privacy allows that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the time, Red. I know we've got Trevor coming on, but I just want to thank you again for your time and sharing the state of Web3 privacy with us. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone had maybe more questions than answers, but we are always looking for more. And I think this is a great way to kick it off and get people's minds turning on privacy side of things.
Yeah, thanks so much, Devin. Thanks, Trevor, and the whole team. It was a pleasure to be on.